Emma Harris always believed her family was ordinary in the best way. They lived in a quiet Oregon town where people waved from their driveways and trusted each other's children. Her parents, Linda and Robert Harris, had been married longer than Emma had been alive. They argued sometimes, but never in public, never loudly. Their love felt calm, settled, almost permanent. Emma grew up thinking this was what marriage became after time smoothed out the rough edges. She never questioned it until the week she came home. Emma, 32 when she returned to her childhood house, called back by a short message from her mother. "Grandma's not doing well. We could use you here." No panic in the words, but something heavy rested beneath them. Emma packed quickly and drove through long stretches of rain-soaked highway, her thoughts drifting between work deadlines and memories of growing up. The house looked the same when she arrived. White siding, a porch that creaked in the same places. Wind chimes her father never took down. Emma felt comforted by the familiarity. She thought some things stayed solid no matter how much time passed. That belief didn't survive the first night. Emma woke late, thirsty, and walked toward the kitchen. The house was dark except for a dim light near the sink. She heard her mother's voice before she saw her. Linda was on the phone, speaking quietly, slowly, like someone choosing each word with care. "I stayed," Linda said. "Not because I didn't know, but because I did." Emma stopped walking. She stood in the hallway, heart beating faster than it should. She didn't understand the words, but she felt their weight. Her mother's voice wasn't angry. It wasn't sad either. Sounded tired, honest, like a door opening after years of being shut. "I made my choice," Linda continued. "I won't. Pretend it didn't hurt." Emma stepped back without making a sound. She returned to her room, but sleep didn't come again. Her mind replayed the sentence over and over. "I stayed, not because I didn't know." Know what? Morning arrived with gray light and silence. At breakfast, everything felt normal. Her father read the newspaper. Her mother poured coffee. They talked about her grandmother's medication and the weather. Emma watched their faces closely, searching for cracks she had never noticed before. She didn't see anything obvious. That frightened her more later that afternoon. Emma sat with her mother on the porch. The air smelled like wet leaves. Cars passed slowly. Linda rocked gently in her chair, hands folded in her lap. Emma decided she couldn't carry the question. "Alone, Mom," Emma said. "What did you mean last night?" Linda didn't ask what she was talking about. She didn't act surprised. She only closed her eyes for a moment, like someone accepting a long-delayed moment. "You weren't meant to hear that," she said, "but maybe you were." Linda stared at the yard instead of at her daughter. When she spoke again, her voice was steady. "Your father wasn't faithful once," she said. "A long time ago." Emma felt the words land hard, sharp, and unreal. She waited for her mother to correct herself, to laugh, to explain it away. None of that happened. When Emma asked, "Before you left for college," Linda replied, "Before you thought about love the way you do now." Emma felt dizzy. She thought of family dinners, holidays, road trips. She thought of her father teaching her how to drive, standing calm in the passenger seat. None of those memories matched what she was hearing. Was it physical? Emma asked carefully. Linda shook her head. "It doesn't matter. The damage was already done." She explained it without drama. No shouting, no scenes. Her father had grown distant during a difficult time at work. He spent more hours away. He talked more to someone else than to his wife. He shared thoughts he stopped sharing at home. One line crossed another, and trust broke quietly. "I felt invisible," Linda said. "That's the part people don't talk about." Emma swallowed. "Why did you stay?" Linda finally looked at her. "Because love is not always loud," she said. "And because leaving is not always strength." Emma didn't know what to say. Her chest felt tight. She wanted the story to end with anger, with a clean break. Instead, it sat in a gray space that made her uncomfortable. That night, Emma visited her grandmother Margaret's room. The old woman lay propped up with pillows, thin but alert. Her eyes lit up when she saw Emma. "You look troubled," Margaret said. Emma hesitated, then nodded. She sat beside the bed and held her grandmother's hand. The skin felt fragile, but the grip was strong. "Did you know about Mom and Dad?" Emma asked. Margaret smiled sadly. "Of course." Emma looked up sharply. "And you never said anything?" Margaret sighed. "Some lessons aren't taught with words." She pointed to a framed photo on the dresser. A young Margaret stood beside her husband on their wedding day. They looked hopeful, certain. "Your grandfather hurt me once too," Margaret said. "His own way." Emma felt another layer of shock settle in. "He wasn't a bad man," Margaret continued, "but he was human. And humans make mistakes when they feel alone." Emma realized something then. This wasn't a single story. It was a pattern. It's quiet, hidden, passed down through silence. Over the next few days, Emma noticed things she had never seen before. Small pauses between her parents' words. It's the way her mother sometimes looked at her father when she thought no one was watching. Not with anger, but with awareness. It's as if she knew something deep and unchangeable. One afternoon, Emma found old letters in a box in the attic. They weren't love letters, they were unfinished notes, apologies never sent. Words that tried to explain feelings without excuses. She recognized her father's handwriting. Her hands trembled as she placed the letters back. She didn't confront him. She wasn't ready. Instead, Emma walked through the neighborhood she grew up in. She passed houses where families still lived behind closed doors, holding stories no one else could see. She wondered how many people carried secrets shaped like love and regret. The past felt closer now. It's too close. On her last evening before returning to Seattle, Emma sat alone in her childhood room. She thought about relationships she had admired, couples she believed were perfect. She wondered what she would do if love failed her quietly without warning. She realized something she had never considered before. Infidelity wasn't always about desire. It was about silence. As Emma packed her bag, she felt changed. Not broken, just awake. The image of love she had carried her whole life had shifted. It was no longer simple, no longer safe in the way she once believed. Before leaving, she stood in the hallway and listened to her parents talk softly in the kitchen. Ordinary words, ordinary voices. Yet now she understood what lived beneath them. She walked out of the house, knowing one thing for certain. Her family's story wasn't over, and neither was hers. Emma returned to Seattle carrying more than just her suitcase. She carried questions, emotions, and the unsettling knowledge of her family's hidden past. At 32, she had always thought she understood love. She had been dating Daniel Brooks for 3 years, a calm and dependable man from Vancouver. He designed buildings with precision and patience, and his kindness was easy to trust. Their relationship had its ups and downs, but nothing she thought she couldn't handle. Yet, after seeing the quiet cracks in her parents' marriage, she found herself watching Daniel differently, noticing small silences she had previously ignored. Wondering if there were hidden corners of his heart she hadn't seen, she tried to slip back into her routine. Mornings at the cafe where she worked, evenings reviewing architecture plans for clients. Weekends spent in Daniel's apartment in downtown Seattle. But every time she tried to push away the thoughts from home, they came back. It's remembered. The way her mother had spoken about loneliness. The subtle heartbreak her grandmother had carried. And she wondered how often people stayed in love out of habit, not desire. She started noticing little things she never paid attention to before. How Daniel sometimes lingered on his phone a bit too long. How his eyes seemed to drift when he was thinking. One rainy evening, they walked along the waterfront. The city. Lights shimmered in the wet pavement. Daniel held her hand, but Emma felt a distance she couldn't ignore. She stopped walking and looked at him. "Daniel," she said, her voice catching, "do you think love can survive betrayal?" He stopped and studied her carefully, his brow furrowed slightly. The question hung between them, heavy with meaning. It depends, he said, after a long pause, on whether the truth comes before or after the damage. Emma exhaled slowly. She hadn't expected an answer that precise, and it unsettled her. She realized that the lessons from her family's history were no longer theoretical. They were alive in her own life. She began talking to Daniel about everything she had learned, her parents' struggles, the emotional affair her father had once had, the quiet pain her mother carried, and the wisdom her grandmother had passed down. Daniel listened in silence, really listened as she poured out years of reflection. He didn't interrupt or defend himself. He only nodded at times, letting her words settle between them. And then he revealed something that surprised her. "I almost crossed a line once," he admitted softly, not physically, just emotionally. "I realized how easily loneliness can make someone drift, and I stopped myself." Emma felt tears prick her eyes. Relief, not sorrow. For the first time, she understood that love was more than trust or loyalty. It was awareness. It was recognizing danger before it became betrayal. It was choosing to be brave in moments when no one was watching. She felt a deep gratitude for Daniel's honesty, a fragile but growing connection that felt stronger than ever. Over the next weeks, Emma observed herself and Daniel with a new perspective. She noticed when he deferred decisions to her, when he paused to understand her feelings, when he reached for her hand after a long day without saying a word. Each small gesture reinforced a new understanding. Love didn't need to be flawless. To endure, it needed honesty, attention, and courage. At the same time, Emma explored her own heart. She wrote in her journal, revisiting memories of past relationships, analyzing where she had ignored warning signs and recognizing the times she had drifted emotionally. She thought about her parents and grandmother, understanding the quiet courage it had taken them to stay, to love despite imperfections, to protect the family without exposing themselves to shame. One weekend, she went to visit her grandmother. Margaret was sitting by the window, knitting slowly, her eyes following the rain. Emma sat beside her and shared what she had learned with Daniel and how it had changed her perspective on relationships. Margaret listened and smiled, squeezing her granddaughter's hand. "Love doesn't have to be perfect," she said, "but it must be brave. It must face itself honestly, every day." Those words echoed in Emma's mind as she returned home. It felt as if a weight had lifted, yet a responsibility had settled in its place. She wanted to build a relationship that could survive truth, that could withstand the temptations and distractions life inevitably offered. She wanted love that was conscious, deliberate, and intentional. Emma started setting small, deliberate routines with Daniel that reinforced honesty and connection. They spent Sunday mornings cooking together, discussing not only practical matters but also feelings and fears. They established nights where phones and work were set aside, leaving only space for conversation and closeness. Emma found herself more patient, more observant, more willing to share fears before they became regrets. Months passed. Autumn turned to winter, and Emma felt a deep sense of stability she had never felt before. She knew challenges would come inevitable. Misunderstandings, moments of doubt, loneliness. But she now understood that the real test of love wasn't whether betrayal could happen. It was whether they could face the truth, however uncomfortable, and choose each other anyway. Then came a subtle test. Daniel received a new project in Vancouver, requiring him to spend several weeks away. Normally, distance had been a source of unease for Emma, but this time she approached it differently. They spoke daily, openly, and without expectation. They shared small stories about their days, moments of joy and frustration, longing without fear. Emma realized she could trust him not because she assumed perfection, but because they had agreed to see each other honestly. During one video call, Daniel paused and looked at her with a seriousness that made her heart skip. "Emma," he said, "I want you to know something. Whatever happens, whatever mistakes we make, I will choose honesty first. Always." Emma smiled, tears threatening to fall. she whispered the same promise to him. In that instant, she realized that she had not only inherited her family's lessons, but had transformed them into her own strength. She wasn't repeating past mistakes. She was learning from them, applying them, and protecting the love she now recognized as precious. Winter faded, and Emma's confidence in love solidified. She understood that infidelity was never just about one act. It was about neglect, loneliness, and the silence that allows distance to grow. She could see now that awareness, communication, and courage were the real defenses. She didn't fear betrayal. She honored love. She nurtured it consciously and bravely every day. Finally, one quiet evening, as snow began to fall over Seattle, Emma sat by the window reflecting on her journey. She thought about her parents, her grandmother, Daniel, and herself. She understood that love carried imperfections, but it also carried choices. The choice to speak, to stay aware, to act with honesty. She felt a sense of peace, a clarity she had never known before. Emma knew that life would continue to test them. That distance, stress, and fatigue would challenge their connection. But she also knew that love could survive, thrive, even when built on truth and bravery. She had learned that infidelity wasn't inevitable, it was avoidable when people faced themselves honestly. As she turned to look at Daniel, who had come to sit beside her, she smiled. They held hands, a quiet, unspoken agreement passing between them. Love, Emma realized, was not just about passion or excitement. It was about choosing to be present, to be vulnerable, and to protect each other's hearts. The lessons of her family were no longer a shadow over her life. They were a guide, a map for understanding herself and others. Emma understood now that mistakes didn't have to define a relationship. The response to them did. She could feel the legacy of quiet courage her mother and grandmother had left her, and she could see herself carrying it forward not as a burden, but as wisdom. And in that knowledge, Emma found hope, love, and the quiet, steady promise of a future built on truth.